Adult and young athletes alike must be particularly mindful of their nutritional needs if they are going to be participating in any type of training program. Many studies have shown that if athletes cannot ingest the right amount of calories or right type of nutrients from their diet, then training adaptations will be affected and will suffer. However, an athlete that provides their body with the proper amount of micronutrients, macronutrients, and fluids will help them experience more prolonged and healthy adaptations. The best way to approach this would be to incorporate healthy dietary practices into the training program itself, to not only optimize training, but to help decrease fatigue, increase speed of recovery, lower the risk of disease, and prevent overtraining and injury. When it comes to child and adolescent athletes, proper nutrition becomes even more essential because it allows for optimal growth and development, in addition to improved performance when engaging in physical activity. However, young athletes must first learn what type of foods and drinks are considered healthy sources of energy, how to eat during an event, and when and what is needed to promote the best replenishment and recovery after an event. This becomes difficult due to the fact that children are heavily influenced by the environment in which they are raised and the lifestyle of their parents, who in most cases don't have the proper nutritional knowledge to encourage their children to eat healthier or choose better food items. One of the first things to observe in athletes' diet is the amount of calories they are consuming, and if it is enough to outweigh or meet the caloric needs of their training program. Balancing caloric intake and energy expenditure is important in preventing athletes from experiencing an energy deficit or excess. Energy deficits can be particularly detrimental to the growth of developmental phases of the pediatric population by causing complications such as short stature, delayed puberty, menstrual dysfunction, loss of muscle mass, and increased susceptibility for fatigue, injury, or illness. Energy excess can cause weight gain that could eventually get the individual to the point of being overweight or obese. Generally, adults who are exercising for 30 to 40 minutes a day, 3 days out of the week, can meet their caloric and nutritional needs from a normal diet. The normal diet could consist of approximately 1,800 to 2,400 kcals a day, or 25 to 30 kcals per kilogram of body weight of an individual that weighs about 50 to 80 kilograms. In a basic exercise program of light to moderate intensity, one can expect to burn or use anywhere from 200 to 400 calories, which means it's not completely necessary to be consuming more than 2,400 calories. If the individual was to increase the volume of their workouts to more increased levels of intense training, exercising 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 to 6 times a week, then they can expect to utilize 600 to 1,200 calories more per hour than while doing light exercise. This would mean their caloric intake would need to be increased to around 25 to 8,000 kcals per day for a 50 to 100 kilogram athlete. Although children are better equipped for aerobic type activities, they differ from adults in that they usually participate in short burst movements that last no longer than 15 seconds. However, energy required are similar between adults and pediatric population in that the recommended energy allowances to ensure proper growth and bodily functions start at around 1,800 kcals per day as well. The minimum nutritional caloric requirements are similar for boys and girls until they reach puberty. The recommended caloric intake for each children between the ages of 4 and 6 is 1,800 calories and will increase at 2,000 calories when they reach the age of 7. Once children reach adolescence at 11 years old, energy requirements will vary depending on age, activity level, growth rate, stages of physical maturity. Typically, the recommendation for male between the ages of 11 and 14 is 25 kcals per day and 22 kcals for females of the same age range. Between the ages of 15 and 18, males will increase their caloric need to about 3,000 kcals per day, and females will remain to 2,200 kcals per day. These recommendations are subject to increase during growth spurts and to replenish energy expended during training. Of the entirety of the calories being taken in, there must be a macronutrient balance of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats to further optimize performance and prevent overtraining. The recommended division of macronutrients in a general diet for ages 4 through 18 would be 45 to 65% carbohydrates, 10 to 35% protein, and 20 to 35% fat. This would also apply to an individual that is participating in general exercise program at light to moderate training intensity. Again, if the individual were to increase their training intensity and volume, or if an athlete is already involved in moderate to high volume training, then they would need to increase their carbohydrate and protein intake. Athletes performing in intense training for 2 to 3 hours, 5 to 6 days out of the week would need to increase their carbohydrates percentage to 55 to 65%, which is approximately 5 to 8 grams of kilogram of body weight per day if they weigh around 50 to 150 kilograms. If that volume were to increase to 3 to 6 hours a day of intense training, 1 to 2 workouts per day, and 5 to 6 days out of the week, then 8 to 10 grams of carbs per kilogram of body mass may need to be consumed. This is done to ensure the preservation and replenishment of muscle glycogen levels within the body. As mentioned previously, caloric intake must be greater than or equal to number of calories expended while training and carrying out other tasks throughout the day. This is particularly important to an athlete who expends more energy than the average individual because the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins from their diet resupply the fuel that the body needs to function properly. These three macronutrients follow different metabolic pathways such as electron transport chain, ATP-PC system, glycolysis to yield water, carbon dioxide, and most importantly, adenotriphosphate, which is the only molecule able to provide energy to the various tissues of the body, thus leading to the muscle contraction we need for everyday life. Along with ATP stores within the cell, the body stores a compound known as creatine phosphate, which is also readily used to fuel short explosive movements. As the three macronutrients are broken down, the body stores some away to have reserve energy in case the body needs a quick source of energy. Carbohydrates such as sugars and starches are converted into glucose, which can either be used right away as a source of energy or stored in the liver and muscles in the form of glycogen. When athletes commence their intense training with high volume for the day, muscle glycogen will be converted back to glucose, which at the point only the muscles can use as fuel. The liver will also convert its glycogen stores to glucose, which will then be dispersed into the bloodstream to maintain glucose levels. Blood glucose is the primary source of energy for the brain when exercising or when at rest, and will particularly be used by the muscles as well. These stores are constantly being replenished, but the size of the glycogen stores is dependent on the amount of carbohydrates consumed and the type of training that the athlete is participating in. Muscle glycogen stores will be depleted as the athlete's training is prolonged, and the body will need to use more and more blood glucose to meet the energy demands until even the liver glycogen stores are depleted, which will result in a state of hypoglycemia or low blood sugar that will ultimately hinder the athlete's performance. One of the recommendations for combating the arrival of hypoglycemia within a workout is drinking sports drinks that contain carbohydrate. Children will need to be careful because if they attain too much carbohydrates from sources such as candy and other calorie-rich sugary sources with little to no nutritious value, then health complications will arise and alter their physical performance. Type 2 diabetes is a chronic disorder that affects the way someone's body metabolizes sugar content like glucose. Factors that are increasing type 2 diabetes in children are weight gain, lack of exercise, and poor nutrition. Reducing exercise also decreases the action of insulin, which is a hormone that allows sugar to enter cells that are used for energy. Over time, children will use the ability of their pancreas to produce insulin and blood sugar will increase. Type 2 diabetic children who stick with a healthy diet are given a better opportunity to control their blood pressure, immune system, and insulin levels. Protein is the second macronutrient, and it is primarily used to repair, build, maintain tissues of the body, help synthesize hormones and enzymes. It is an important component in the child's growth and strength. The body will usually gather about 5% of its energy from the protein, as it can be broken down and used as fuel. However, if an individual were to eat few calories and not enough carbohydrates but continue to do intense endurance exercise, the glycogen stores would eventually deplete and the body will have to rely on skeletal muscles for energy by breaking down amino acids with protein, which will then be converted into glucose. If there isn't the right amount of protein being ingested by the athletes, they run the risk of having a decreased rate of recovery, and eventually lean muscle will waste away and training intolerance could ensue. To prevent this from happening, it is recommended that 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight be consumed by children, adolescents, and adults. However, research has shown that if an athlete engages in intense training, then they will need to consume about 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight to prevent that increased catabolism. Children from 4 to 8 years of age require about 16 grams of protein per day, but once the age of 9 is reached, male and female protein intake differs. Males will need 31 grams per day between the ages of 9 to 13, and 49 grams per day between the ages of 14 and 18. Females require 24 grams of protein per day between the ages of 9 to 13 and about 35 grams between the ages of 14 and 18. The last macronutrient is fat and functions similarly to carbohydrates in that the body uses fats as fuel sources when exercising. It allows the sparing of glycogen stores when the athlete prolongs their workout and the intensity decreases, meaning more oxygen is available to the cells. Fats provide more fuel per unit compared to carbs, giving the body 9 calories of energy per gram as opposed to 4 calories of energy that carbs provide. Fats are essential to allow absorption of vitamins A, D, E, and K. Athletes are recommended to consume similar amounts of fat to that of non-athletes, which is around 30% of their total calorie intake. Intake of essential fatty acids such as linoleic and alpha-linoleic acid are of increased importance for athletes and thus allow the increased percentage of K count. This is dependent, however, on the type of training of the athlete and their goals. The fats or lipids consumed within the diet have been shown to be powerful mediators of immune function and may even help to counteract the suppressive nature of strenuous exercise on the immune system and the anti-inflammatory response to the body. However, it must be noted that the saturated fats from chips, candies, fried foods, and baked goods should not make up more than 10% of total calorie intake. Parents are a major influence in their children's nutrition and eating lifestyle. A healthy diet and engagement in physical activity are practices that begin at home. As mentioned previously, the development of excess weight, obesity, and even diabetes are consequences of obtaining large amounts of nutrient-deprived calories from overly processed food. Micronutrients are vitamins and minerals that aid in carrying out various processes within the body. All vitamins and minerals are required for overall good health, but there should be particular attention paid to calcium, vitamin D, which aids in the absorption of calcium and iron. Calcium is important in the process that allow muscle contraction, normal enzyme activity, and even the maintenance of bones, which will help them with their healthy diet and physical activity needs. A healthy amount of sodium is 1,500 milligrams a day for all Americans. However, an average child between the ages of 2 to 19 eat more than 3,000 milligrams of sodium a day, which is not appropriate and can increase the blood pressure in a child's body. Once children reach the preteen and teen years, calcium is important because children are going to reach puberty. Eating disorders occur around this phase and affects their overall appearance and physical performance in and out of school. Having children follow a healthier diet that does not include high amounts of saturated fats, added sugars, and sodium can be a great way to prevent future complications like high blood pressure and obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Increasing the amount of exercise that helps the heart be more efficient in working the stroke volume and distributing oxygenated blood faster to all parts of the body. Another aspect of training would be to keep a healthy balance of fat percentage to lean body mass, which in some cases causes the athletes to purposely restrict their caloric intake and entering a caloric deficit. This can include any one of the macronutrients, but mostly consists of ingesting lower levels of carbs or fats. If done improperly or for too long, this will lead to the athlete to experience the loss of muscle mass as well. An example of a dietary method employed by many people that has reported several positive findings in intermittent fasting. In recent years, it has gained popularity as a weight loss routine and lifestyle for both adults and children. Typically, the fasting period is a minimum of 16 hours, while the remaining 8 hours of the day are allowed for nutritive intake. It is important to note fasting periods are not limited to the specific time frame. A daily fasting schedule can be broken down into different intervals that include fasting periods of 16, 18, or 20 hours, with non-fasting periods of 8, 6, or 4 hours. Alternate day fasting, only eating every other day, is also a common practice. Concerns arise when diet methods such as this one are applied to children. Common concerns associated with children fasting are the risks of malnutrition development or underconsumption. However, it is important to remember that much of the fasting period is completely throughout sleep. Appropriate intake is key for the successful fasting process. Intermittent fasting does not justify improper eating habits. It is important to supply the body with foods that will properly facilitate bodily functions and basic dietary needs of proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals. During and after feeding time, insulin levels will be raised, allowing uptake of glucose to the brain and muscles, at which point excess glucose is stored as glycogen. These stores last approximately 24 hours. As fasting ensues, fatty acids will be released from adipose tissue to be converted into ketone bodies in the liver. Ketone bodies are produced as a source of energy when glucose is not readily available, allowing the body to sustain itself for the next feeding period. Insulin secretion should not be initiated 5 times a day. This is directly related to the development of type 2 diabetes, which not all fad diets are safe to adopt. It is clear this intake consumption pattern could be of great benefit to all individuals, specifically those combating the disease. It is important to note that kids of young age often skip meals or don't feel hungry at designated meal times. They run on their own schedule, and while parents distress over their unwillingness to eat, it is natural behavior for a child who is adjusting to a mealtime routine. In a healthy child, a missed meal should not be a cause of panic. These simple facts should help ease parents in the idea of allowing their children to adopt this diet regimen. Take the last half century, for example. Our access to food and our intake has skyrocketed. We no longer eat to live, rather we live to eat. Children know not what proper well-balanced meals are anymore. To most individuals, it may seem absurd, even dangerous, to go 16 or more hours without eating. Yet it is argued that our level of consumption in this day and age is unhealthy. Common misconceptions have led people to believe that they must feed frequently throughout the day to ensure optimal brain and body functions. We know this to be untrue. Will develop bad dietary habits and develop health complications. The pediatric population is affected by the social norms and diets followed by their parents. They need to be restricted and follow a healthier lifestyle. Eating appropriate portions and items deemed low in fat and sodium will benefit a child's development as well as optimize athletic performance and physicality. Micronutrients and how much are contained within each food so they can incorporate and make better choices moving forward.